And you sort of list a film, and they go, no, never heard of it. And you go, this one? No, never heard of it. And you basically start then reciting your CV, and it starts to get so humiliating that you end up kind of just sort of sweating a bit and disappearing to a corner. But as this film has been coming out, people do seem to have seen it and responded really in an incredibly passionate way, and it means such a great deal to Felicity and I, because we did sort of pour our hearts into it.
When you took this on, I mean, it was such a I guess it's always a responsibility to play a real-life person who's actually living and can then grade your performance. Has to be a scary thing right there. But, I mean, what was going through your mind when this role was offered to you?
You do that thing. I mean, I read this script, and it really hit me in an incredibly sort of visceral way. I thought it was going to be a biopic of Stephen's life, and what I read was this really intricate and incredibly passionate but complicated love story about two really quite brilliant people, and when I heard that James Marsh was directing it, I'd seen Man on Wire, which is one of my favourite films of all time. And
great documentary that won an Oscar, actually. The director of this film did that movie.
And so the idea of that director with this subject matter was an incredibly tantalising combination. And so I did that thing that, I don't know, you go for auditions for things, and you do zillions of auditions, and you rarely get the parts. There are some wonderful statistics out there, which my dad always reminds me of. But you go and you pursue particularly those ones that are as interesting as this full-heartedly. But I don't think you ever really expect to get them. But my God, do you tell the people in charge how confident you are about how you would go about it. You do all that thing that you do when you're sort of trying to get a job of lying. And so then when I actually got the job, it was this amazing. It did really feel special. I felt like it was an extraordinary opportunity to tell a really beautiful story. But at the same point, I knew that Stephen and Jane and Jonathan and the children would end up seeing the film, and that however well we did, if they didn't enjoy it, if they didn't believe in it, then it would have been a bit of a upset, really. And so that those stakes, or that weight, was definitely on James, the director, and Felicity, and my shoulders for a few months. Anyway, when they saw the film, they were so kind about it, and I've slept really well ever since.
But you also had something most actors don't have in most roles they play. You know, the guy you're playing sitting there on set at one point. Yeah, he was there. And what was that like for you?
Well, so I met Stephen just before we started filming. And that had been an extraordinary interaction for a few hours. And then our first week of filming, we shot in Cambridge. We shot all the exteriors in Cambridge. And it was on our second day that we were shooting the May Ball, the big fireworks display scene. And Felicity and I were there, and there were thousands of extras, and they had 3 sets of fireworks. So we had 3 takes to get the fireworks out. So everyone was a bit nervous about that because, you know, fireworks are very expensive. And so we needed to get those shots in those 3 takes. And then on cue, just as the first set of fireworks went off, Stephen arrived, flanked by his nurses, you know, his famous silhouette, and he was literally spotlit by his computer screen, and on cue the fireworks went off, and I describe it as like the greatest rock star entrance you have ever seen in your life. But that evening, Jane and Jonathan also came to set, and Tim and Lucy, 2 of Stephen and Jane's children, and Felicity and I'll never forget, we were doing the scene when we're on the bridge. And out of one eye line, we could see Stephen and his nurses, and out of the other, we could see Jane and Jonathan. And we just sort of got closer together, going, "Come on, head down, stay focused." But it was pretty intimidating.
That's got to be the scariest thing ever.
Well, I would say the scariest thing was seeing him just before he went to see the film. I think that's actually the scariest moment.
Oh yeah, so you were there when he came in with his,
he came to Working Title, the producers in London, and they had a screening for him, and I was rehearsing something, so I couldn't see him afterwards. But I saw him just before, and I said to him, "Look, Stephen, I'm really nervous, but do let me know what you think." and he took a while. He now just uses this muscle under his eye, so he has glasses with a sensor. And then on the computer screen, he has the alphabet with this cursor that goes across the alphabet, and it stops every time he torches this muscle underneath his eye. So that's on one letter. So it can take 10 minutes, 8 minutes for him to spell out a sentence. So there was this long, long pause. And I said, let me know what you think. And his response was, I will let you know what I think, good or otherwise. to which, sweat just started pouring out. And I said, okay, Stephen, if it's otherwise, please just stick to the word otherwise. Let's not go into all of the minutiae of all the details. And anyway, fortunately, he was incredibly generous and has been, which was just a wonder.
I know when you, I heard something at some point when you won the Golden Globe. Congratulations again on that. He put out a statement or something saying, congratulations to Eddie Redmayne on the Golden Globe. You nailed me, or you got me.
He went onto Facebook. He joined Facebook a few months ago and has been such a great supporter of the film. And I'm just this is occasionally I hear these things. I'm not on Facebook, so I get sort of told that he's commented on the film. And no, it really was amazing. And Jane and Jonathan have written these really beautiful emails. There was a really funny one actually. One of the funniest one was from Lucy. Their daughter, and she wrote this email really passionate about the film and so lovely about it, and she said just two little quibbles that I have. First thing is our eldest brother Robert, so the eldest child, that scene where he plays the piano, hilarious. The idea of Robert playing the piano is apparently the funniest thing ever. And then the second thing she said was literally great, but just that last scene. And do you remember in that last scene, just when they've been to see the Queen, Lucy is wearing this kind of sailor's pinafore outfit. It's all very sort of proper. She goes, I like to think I'm a little more punk rock. So those were her two comments on the film.
It's a remarkable performance. In so many ways, you got actors here, and they realize what you did here, but in every way, how did you keep track, since this was not shot in sequence, how do you keep track of where you are in the illness, in what's happening to him physically all through his life, or what's portrayed here, even though you're shooting out of sequence?
Well, the amazing thing I had on this film, which I think as actors we rarely get, particularly on film, is time. We had, from when I was cast to when we started filming, there was about 4 months. And the day after I got cast, I went to an ALS clinic in London and basically just started educating myself on the reality of the disease. And I met with specialists there and were introduced to people living with ALS and their families. And they were incredibly generous and invited me into their homes, some of them. But what was complicated was, with ALS, you have what are called upper neurons and lower neurons, and if your upper neurons stop working, there's a kind of spasticity, a kind of rigidity that happens, and if your lower neurons stop working, there's a kind of a softness, a wilting, and ALS is a combination of those two things. But how it manifests itself, so what is upper and what is lower, what is stiff and what is and what is soft, is different in every patient. So it was about trying to work out what Stephen's decline was. And there's lots of documentary of Stephen, but that's all from the 80s when he was in the chair, when he became famous. And there's very little, or there's no documentary that I could find of him before that. So basically I took all the photos that I could and showed them to Dr. Seidel, who was the specialist I was working with, and she would decipher by... There was one example in which, on their wedding day, Stephen's holding Jane's hand, and at a quick glance it looks like a totally normal sort of photo, except you then see his hands on top of hers, and all of his weight is poured into hers, and his hand is soft. So Dr. Seidel would go, okay, so from that date, he's got lower neuron in his right hand. And we literally went through and deciphered what his decline would have been. And one really interesting thing, which you guys can see on YouTube, is Stephen did zero gravity a couple of years ago. He went up and did the zero gravity thing. And it's the only time you can see him out of the wheelchair, and he's floating and there you see which parts of his body have got lower neuron and which have got upper neuron. So it was a bit of an investigation, and I then worked with a dancer who helped sort of find that physicality in my body.
Acting is hard enough, but keeping track of all of this is a whole other level. This is
Well, the really important thing for me, though, was when you meet Stephen, the illness is entirely secondary to him. After he was diagnosed, age 21, he has paid very little interest to it. He's lived forward and passionately and fully. And
73 years old.
73 years old, completely defied expectation. And what I was keen to do when I read the script is it wasn't a story about an illness or about a physicality. It was a really human story. And so my job was in those 4 months to try and be or get the physicality so embedded in me that when Felicity and I were playing together, we didn't have to think about it. We could just play the love story, really.
Which is so great. Before I open it up to questions from the audience, I just have to take you back to something you said a little earlier about your father, who didn't like, it sounded like he didn't trust in the acting profession.
Oh, no. My dad, I come from a family, like, there's not an actor or any, so my parents are like the most supportive people in the world, but my dad sort of works with numbers. He works in finance, and he had had a friend who was a theatre producer who had told him all about the statistics of how many actors are in work and how many actors are and when I was starting out, he was always sort of, he was so really supportive, but always just gently reminding me that, as I was working in pubs and being a waiter for a long time, he was going, "Have you thought about producing?" was always his comment. But no, he's very happy now.
I bet he is. But that's good. That's sweet. That he's there now.
He was always there, but But it's true. Like it's. I don't know what you guys think. I love what I do, and I could never do anything else. But if I had children, I would still be cautious about encouraging them into this precarious, wonderful, scary profession.
My father was never in favor of me going into anything related to show business. Just wanted me to sell tennis rackets. Oh yeah,
tennis rackets.
Oh yeah, that's what it said. Oh yeah. Well, he was a tennis pro, and
was he really?
Then he sold tennis rackets. But this is not about me. So, but that's what happened. Let's take some questions from the audience here, and just raise your hand right in the front row. Yes, sir. How do you like LA? Okay.
I love LA. I've been coming here for about 10 years on and off. You'll find that there's always an influx of British actors in January and February. We all basically tell our families, that we're coming over to to do auditions and things. We're basically just escaping from the rain. I love it. For years, I would come over for a month or two and stay. Friends of mine would stay on friends' floors and drive to auditions, and I've still not got driving in LA. I'm always either 2 hours early for a meeting or 3 hours late. As far as I'm concerned, rush hour is all day. It's, even that famous line of, like, was it Katharine Hepburn who said that, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to an actor, and she said, take fountain. Or something like that. Was it yeah,
I know, that is a famous,
great bit of counsel. It's helped me in the past as I've sweated my way to an audition. I do love Los Angeles. It took me a while to get to know it, because in London you stumble across things. You can walk out and like a bit like New York and stumble across things. Whereas I feel in LA you have to know to go to the random strip mall with the sushi restaurant next to a laundrette that is the best sushi in the world. And it took me about 7 years to be introduced to said sushi restaurant. But it's amazing.
My favorite line about LA is Goldie Hawn in Butterflies Are Free, the movie. She said, "I would have gone to UCLA, but I couldn't find a parking place." So great. Yes, right there.
Well, brilliant job. That was great. Were there any lingering characteristics after filming had wrapped, or were you able to part ways fairly easily?
Oh, that's interesting for an actor. Were you able to leave this character, and or were there lingering things?
No, it was interesting. I've normally been quite good at, if there's another job, at kind of shedding a character, and this was a pretty rigorous shoot, and I haven't worked since, and it did take a while. If I'm being honest, I thought I was fine. People around me were like, "No, stop." And I often find it weirdly in my hands, just in sort of. In how that tends to be weirdly quite often where I'll start with a character is in their hand gesture. Or, so it did take a while, but I would have long baths. I worked with a very brilliant osteopath for the 4 months beforehand, who helped sort of align my body while we were filming it. There was an absolutely hilarious moment so I've been seeing him for a week or two while I was rehearsing, and he was like, "Ed, this is kind of intriguing. Your spine is beginning to do really sort of offbeat things." And I was like, "Okay." And he said, I think I want to write an essay, but I want you to be a test case." And I was like, "This is not what you want to hear from your osteopath. All you want to hear is everything is totally fine. You're absolutely normal." So that was discouraging. But no, it was actually okay, but it has taken a wee while.
But that's interesting. You haven't worked since? No, and you are about to do a picture that sounds fascinating called The Danish Girl with director Tom Hooper.
Yeah, no, actually, this project has been around for, I think, over 10 years in various different incarnations, and I've been sort of attached to it for a couple. And so we were working in the summer, and the film was going to go, and then Alicia Vikander, who I'm playing opposite, suddenly had something else she had to do. So it's now we're starting in about 2 weeks. I know. So I've just been rehearsing in London last week, and back to work. Back to work in a few days.
After all this time, that's got to be, a whole
terrifying. Yeah. I'll use that of fear. Thanks, Pete.
Wow. Okay. Right there.
The question was that James Marsh, our director, was very free, allowed us great freedom and encouraged us. We had Anthony's script, which was great, but encouraged us also to play around it. And this young lady was asking if there were any scenes that stick out or specific moments. And actually, one of my favourite moments in the film is actually with Charlie Cox, who plays Jonathan. And he is Charlie's an old friend of mine. In fact, when I got cast in this, before he was cast, he called me up and he said, "Ed, the great thing about getting the privilege of playing Stephen Hawking is you have no option but to give it 1,000%. And he was absolutely right. And when he then got cast in this film, having someone you adore, like who's a great friend in that part, was really wonderful. There's a scene when they're in the church, when Stephen comes into the church with the beer bottles, and Charlie was feeding me the beer, and it was my first day in that level of physicality, and the first days in those physicalities you were always worried, am I taking it too far or not far enough, and so I was quite tense, and he was feeding me, and then he improvised some line which was like, "Be careful, you got to drive," or something like this, and I completely lost it. Like but I lost it, and then I was like, I've got to stay in physicality. So and the take they use is that improvised line, and so you sort of see me go, and then try to sort of keep it together. So, but it sort of works, and it has a likeness to it. So that was probably one of my favourite lines.
That's great. Yeah.
So you've been acting since you were very young, and yet when I think after you go to university, you didn't study performance and theater, you studied art history.
Yeah.
Did you originally consider a career in art history, and if so, when did you decide to pursue acting?
Okay, she's saying you started acting young, but then when you went to university, you did art history. Is that I think she's saying, is that your big passion? Was that going to be your career?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. So my passions were art and drama, and it was a conversation with my mum and dad. They again, because they don't come from this world, they were like, "We'd love you to act, but will you get a degree first?" And I thought, if I'm going to get a degree at university, then I don't necessarily. I want to do it in something that's other than what I want to do. And also, the universities in England have great freedom to do drama. There are great drama departments there anyway, and so I took it as an opportunity to to study something else I was interested in. And the irony was that in my second year, it was the 400th anniversary of Twelfth Night. And Twelfth Night had been commissioned by the Middle Temple Hall in London. They commissioned Shakespeare to write it 400 years ago. And 400 years on, the Middle Temple Hall, which still exists, commissioned the Globe Theatre, which was headed up by the amazing actor Mark Rylance. I don't know if you guys know him, like best actor in the world. And they wanted to do an all-male production of Twelfth Night. And so they were looking around young actors to play Viola opposite Mark playing Olivia. And what's interesting is drama schools in London won't let you out if you're doing a degree there. You stay there for those 3 years. And so weirdly, I got a call and I got cast, and the university I was at let me out for a term to go and do that play opposite Mark, and that was really my training ground because I learned to speak verse. There was a movement coach, there was a vocal coach, and that was how I got an agent, was doing that play. So it all sort of ended up working. You know how these things happen; you can never sort of predict them. But
okay, yeah, let's take someone up there. Yeah, hi.
Okay, so you had mentioned that it took about 4 months of preparation for this role. My question is, how long did you have to prepare before you first read it, before you got the role?
Well, do you know what? I didn't audition for it. It was a very long process of me. So I got the script. I think there was a group of actors that working title were thinking of to get the film financed. I don't think neither Felicity nor I were big enough names to get the film financed. But then I sort of bludgeoned. I'd done Les Miserables, which working title had made, and I read this script, and my brilliant agent here managed to sort of guilt trip the guys at working title into at least allowing me a phone call with James, the director. And James lived in Copenhagen, and so we spoke on the phone, and as I was saying before, I tried to speak really passionately and confidently. And he then came to London, and we went to a pub, and it was a Tuesday afternoon, and it was, I'll never forget it, because he basically said, "What do you want to drink?" And it was something, that killer question. It was like, what sort of actor does he want me to be? Like, am I meant to be like Oliver Reed, or am I meant to be like, do you want it? And so I was like, I said, beer? and he was like, okay, Eddie will have a beer, I'll have a coffee. And I was like, oh God. At which point he basically went on to have about 5 espressos. He just got like wired on caffeine. And I had about 5 pints and got really drunk. And somewhere along the line, we basically realised that we were both really pretty scared of the project, but we opened ourselves up to those fears and what the work would take and what it would do, and fortunately he then cast me. What was hilarious was then so that was without an audition, and I don't know, you'd have to ask James why. It was sort of blind faith. I think he was probably too scared to test. But then this thing happened where they were auditioning for Jane, and Felicity was coming to audition. And I kept getting these calls from James going, by the way, this isn't an audition for you. You're cast. This isn't an audition for you. And then he would call up and go, by the way, Eddie, this isn't an audition. I was like, he doth protest too much. This is definitely an audition for me. I was like, don't for a second think this isn't going to, Donna Langley at the head of Universal, all of the sort of the focus troops. And unfortunately, that audition, Felicity was an old friend again, and someone, we'd never worked together, we'd known each other. And fortunately, something happened in that room that got people excited.
Now, that scared me when you were saying that, though. But it's not an audition for you. It's not it is in your mind.
But also, I don't know how you guys find, but I find it's a mixed blessing not auditioning, because if you don't audition, you're like, yes, I don't have to go through that horrific process. But then you turn up on day one and you open your mouth the first time, sort of look behind the camera and you see producers going,
I know, that's exactly
like that, and so sometimes, at least if you've auditioned, you've given them some sense of what you're going to do. So yeah, I never know which is better, to audition or not to audition.
Okay, got time for 1 or 2 more? Right there. Yes, go.
Fantastic. I was just wondering how James directed you at all. Can you share something? He worked with you?
Absolutely. So James, our director, comes from a documentary background, and I I feel like the term collaboration is thrown around quite a lot, but he has this amazing capacity to embolden every department, and everything about this film, everything affected everything else. So any physical work I was doing, if it wasn't costumed correctly, it wouldn't expose the thinness or the specifics of the physicality. If the makeup, that would have ramifications on the makeup, and the cinematography, what angle I was being shot from, all of those things really had to work together. And James did this amazing thing by like galvanizing each department to speak up. And similarly to Felicity and I, he really gave us free rein to play. And in the end, there were moments. Originally in the script, I think it had cards that went 5 years later, 10 years later, and James wanted to make time fluid in it. So he brought all those passages where, at the end of the day, you would try and snatch 5 minutes for Felicity and I and the kids to improvise together, and he would catch that sort of home footage in order that it just sort of shows time progressing rather than being too linear with it.
We're out of time here, but I just have to say, extraordinary performance. Good luck going on your next job now. And good luck going forward at BAFTA and the Oscars and everything else. Eddie Redmayne, fantastic.